What does it mean to lose everything in a single moment? David stood in the living room of the home he had built with Sarah, the woman he had loved for a decade, staring at the walls that once held their laughter. The air felt heavy, as if it knew what was coming. He had sensed the distance growing between them late nights at work, curt texts, her eyes avoiding his, but nothing could have prepared him for the sound of the front door opening that evening. The soft creak followed by footsteps that weren't hers alone. Sarah walked in, her hand clasped tightly around a man's. He was tall, polished, with a confidence that seemed to mock David's quiet existence. But it was the Childa, small girl, no older than 5, clinging to Sarah's other hand that made David's heart lurch. Her eyes, wide and curious, mirrored Sarah's in a way that felt like a betrayal etched in flesh. Before David could speak, Sarah's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unyielding. "Sign these and get out," she said, tossing a stack of divorce papers onto the coffee table. The words landed like a guillotine, severing the life he thought he knew. David's mind reeled. He had met Sarah in college, where her fiery spirit and quick wit had drawn him in like a moth to flame. They had built a life together, late night talks about dreams, a modest house filled with plans for a family. But somewhere along the way, the warmth had faded. He had blamed himself, working longer hours to provide, hoping to fix what he couldn't name. Now, staring at the stranger beside her and the child who wasn't his, he realized the truth had been hidden in plain sight. "Who is she?" David asked, his voice trembling as he gestured toward the girl. Sarah's lover, Mark, as David would later learn, shifted uncomfortably, but Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "She's mine," she said simply, "and she's why we're done." The words were a puzzle David couldn't solve. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the child's presence held him back. Her small hand gripped Sarah's, and David saw innocence there, a fragile life caught in a storm she didn't understand. The papers sat untouched on the table. David's eyes traced the words divorce, custody, assets, but they blurred into meaningless shapes. He looked at Sarah, searching for the woman he once knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You stopped listening years ago, David. You were too busy playing the hero, thinking money could fix us." Her words stung, not because they were false, but because they carried a truth he had ignored. As David stood frozen, a new figure emerged from the hallway. It was Ellen, Sarah's mother, her face etched with exhaustion and something deeper regret. She had always been a quiet presence in their lives, a woman who preferred to observe rather than interfere. But now, she stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "David, there's something you need to know." Sarah's expression faltered, a crack in her armor. Mark looked away, as if he knew what was coming. Ellen's next words changed everything. "The girl isn't Sarah's. She's mine." The room seemed to tilt. David's eyes darted between Ellen and the child, whose dark curls and wide eyes suddenly made sense. Ellen, who had lived alone since her husband's death, who had retreated into herself, had she been hiding this? "I was ashamed," Ellen continued, her voice breaking. "I had an affair years ago, after Sarah's father passed. I couldn't tell anyone. Sarah found out last year, and she took her in. She's been raising her as her own." David's anger surged, not at Ellen, but at Sarah. "You let me think." He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah had orchestrated this moment, using the child as a weapon to push him away. But why? Ellen's confession unraveled the narrative Sarah had crafted, and David saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. Mark, silent until now, spoke up. "It's not what you think, man. Sarah and I were not together. She asked me to come here to make it easier for you to let go." The twist hit David like a wave. Sarah hadn't been unfaithful, not in the way he thought. Mark was a prop, a friend roped into her plan to force David out. The child wasn't a symbol of betrayal, but of Sarah's attempt to protect her mother's secret. Yet the divorce papers were real, and so was the distance between them. Sarah's voice softened, but it carried no apology. "I can't do this anymore, David. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I need to be free." David's heart ached, but he saw the truth in her words. Their marriage had been unraveling for years, and he had been too blind to see it. He thought of the child, caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes, and of Ellen, whose vulnerability had been weaponized. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking, and signed the papers. Not out of defeat, but because he knew holding on would only deepen the wounds. As he packed a suitcase, Ellen approached him, the child now asleep in her arms. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered. "I never meant for this to hurt you." He nodded, unable to find words. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a stranger's now. He stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of loss heavy on his shoulders. But there was something else, to a spark of clarity. He had loved Sarah fiercely, but love alone couldn't sustain them. Sometimes, letting go was the only way to honor what had been. Months later, David found himself in a small apartment, rebuilding his life piece by piece. He worked as a counselor now, helping others navigate their own broken paths. He thought often of the child, hoping she was loved and safe. He even reached out to Ellen, offering forgiveness she hadn't asked for. Sarah, he heard, had moved to another city, chasing a new start. He didn't hate her. He couldn't. She had given him 10 years of memories, some radiant, some painful, but all part of who he was. One evening, as he sat by his window watching the city lights, David realized he was no longer defined by the moment Sarah walked through that door. He was more than the man who had lost everything. He was the man who had chosen to walk away, to let love transform into something new, compassion, not just for others, but for himself. The question that had haunted him, "What does it mean to lose everything?" had an answer now. It meant finding the strength to begin again.